Okay, what if I told you the economic textbooks we've relied on for decades are just wrong? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're ripping the Band-Aid off a landmark paper called Trade Reform and Regional Dynamics. It uses 25 years of hard data from Brazil to give us a massive, and I mean massive, reality check. For years, economists assumed free trade was this quick, easy fix. You know the story. You lose a factory, the workers just pack up and move, and the market magically heals. But the actual data? It tells a fundamentally different, and frankly, much darker story.
It really is the ultimate clash between theory and reality. In the textbook, a local factory closes down, right? So the workers simply move to a booming city, and boom, the market heals. Painless, efficient, super quick. But out in the real world, there is no quick bounce back. When a factory town loses its main industry, it actually triggers a brutal 20-year downward spiral of pure economic devastation. It's a total slap in the face to everything we thought we knew. I want to read you a quote directly from the researchers behind this study, Rafael Dix-Carneiro and Brian Kovak, because it's just that powerful. They wrote, "Contrary to conventional wisdom, we do not find that the impact of local shocks is dissipated over time through wage-equalizing migration." Think about that. That single sentence completely shatters the myth of painless free trade. They went looking for this great migration of workers seeking better wages that all the models promised, and they simply didn't find it. So, let's dive into Section 1, Brazil's giant experiment, tracking the destinies of millions.
25 years. We really need to emphasize the sheer scale of the data here. This isn't just a quick snapshot or some short-term survey. These researchers tracked the actual, real-life destinies of millions of workers for a quarter of a century. By using official government tax and employment records, literally nobody could hide. We get to see exactly what happened to everyday people long after the politicians and news cameras packed up and went home.
So how did this ultimate economic experiment actually happen? Well, in the early 1990s, Brazil aggressively slashed its import tariffs. They just opened the floodgates to foreign goods. Researchers then monitored 475 distinct local labor markets. And because they had formal employment records matching specific employers to specific employees, they had totally unprecedented visibility. They literally watched exactly what happened to these towns as the trade barriers vanished.
Which brings us to Section 2, 20 lost years, the face slap to conventional wisdom. Let's walk through how this damage actually unfolded. In 1990, massive tariff cuts begin. By 95, the trade liberalization is completely done. Now, according to the textbooks, by the year 2000, things should be stabilizing, right? Workers moving to greener pastures. But the reality is incredibly grim. By 2000, the regional wage and job gaps were continuously widening. The pain actually grew for an entire decade after the reforms ended. It wasn't until 2010 that the economic damage finally leveled off. That's 2 decades, 2 whole decades of compounding local hardship.
And when you compare formal earnings growth over those 20 years, the divergence is just shocking. The positively affected regions, the ones that didn't face steep foreign competition, enjoyed healthy, positive growth. But the hard-hit regions, they experienced a massive negative decline. It represents entirely shattered local economies. The economic gap between these towns didn't just close, it became an absolute chasm.
All right, Section 3, the doom loop logic, why markets don't heal.
Academics like to call this sluggish factor adjustment, but we're going to call it what it truly feels like for the people living there, the doom loop. It's a mutually reinforcing trap. Capital, meaning money, businesses, infrastructure, completely stops investing in a dying region. And because the money leaves, the labor is trapped. It becomes physically impossible to recover. The town just slowly suffocates.
Let's break down the logic of this downward spiral step by step. Step 1. The local industry gets hit hard by dropping tariffs. Step 2. Seeing the decline, capital flees. Banks stop lending, and new businesses refuse to open. Step 3. Because there's absolutely no investment, local job creation plummets. And finally, Step 4. The workers who couldn't afford to leave right away find themselves stuck in a dying ecosystem. The workers and the remaining money are trapped, which just reinforces the whole vicious cycle all over again.
Moving to Section 4, the gray market trap. Where did the workers go?
This might be the most important question of the entire study. If millions of displaced workers didn't migrate to better cities, and they didn't find new jobs in their hometowns, where on earth did they vanish to?
When you look at the destination of these displaced workers, a tiny sliver managed to find formal work in other local sectors. A medium-sized chunk became permanently unemployed. But the vast majority, they went into the gray zone. Millions of displaced workers vanished off the official books entirely. They slipped right into the informal economy. We really have to grasp the staggering human cost of this shift. Moving to the gray zone is not some lateral career move. It is a catastrophic loss of livelihood. In the formal sector, you have legally mandated protections, benefits, and higher wages. But in the gray zone, you are completely off the books. Zero safety net, significantly lower pay, and often incredibly harsh working conditions. When the textbook model said the market adjusted, what it actually meant was that real people were forced into the shadows just to survive.
Which leads us to our final section, Section 5, Flaws of a Perfect Theory, What the Models Missed.
Now, it's really important to impartially report exactly what the researchers state about their own data. When we look at relative regional effects, the study conclusively proves severe 20-year local devastation and inequality. However, the study does not measure the absolute national benefit. It's entirely possible that having cheaper goods made Brazil as a whole richer overall. We just know that the specific people in towns in the crosshairs paid an incredibly steep, multi-generational price for that national growth.
And that leaves us with a pretty staggering realization. Foundational economic textbooks completely ignored 20 years of devastating human suffering at the local level. Why? Simply because the math looked fine on a national scale. So we have to ask, if they missed 20 years of human suffering, what else are they dead wrong about? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the models, keep looking at the data, and keep learning.